Hi, my name is Rachel Lambert, and I'm a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I just want to let you know that this is primarily pre-recorded. So the the next 30 minutes are going to be pre-recorded, but I'm also going to be here and then I'm going to be available for questions at the end. So as you're listening, put any questions in the chat and we can even start a conversation that's very multimodal, where I can respond to the questions as they emerge. I mean, if I don't respond to all of them, I'm thinking about them. And then at the very end, we'll start discussing them. So at any point, throw your questions into the chat. Thank you. So today we're talking about UDL Math and talking about how we use UDL Math in Tier 1 settings. So what is UDL Math? I really want to start here with some gestures that I've worked with teachers over the years to help describe sort of the process of how we make math more universally designed. It starts with first understanding that math class is too narrow. Like math class doesn't work for enough kids, right? Secondly, we need to open it up. How do we open up math class, make it more accessible, make it more engaging? And then last, we need to provide strategic support. So opening it up isn't enough for all kids. So we want to make sure we also build in strategic supports to help all kids engage in math. A little bit about who I am. I was a classroom teacher before I became a researcher for over 10 years. I worked as a special educator, as a research room teacher, as a preschool intervention teacher, and also as a general ed classroom teacher in inclusive settings. I have a master's in learning disabilities, and then I also have a Ph.D. with a focus in mathematics in the area of urban education. And now I am a professor at UC Santa Barbara in both mathematics education and special education. My research, I'm telling you a tiny bit about sort of the variety of my research and then where we're going to focus today. So some of my research is critical analysis of comparing the fields of special education mathematics to mathematics education and looking at the similarities and differences with a critical lens. Another area is how do kids with disabilities construct identities as math learners? So how do they understand themselves as math learners? And my most recent project, which is a collaborative project, thinks about that specifically for Latinas who have a learning disability or dyslexia or ADHD or emotional disabilities. I have a project, particularly since the pandemic, on reimagining intervention. Our current work is on games. And I'll tell you a little bit about this project today, which is about neurodiversity in math, and it's a study with and about dyslexic mathematicians. And then the last area that's the focus for today is UDL Math, which takes design thinking and mathematics and UDL and kind of smushes it together into a way to make classroom instruction more accessible and engaging. All of my research is available on my website, mathematizingforall.com. So I make sure that I have an accessible version of every published article that I do. So you can find it all there. And there will also be links to other things I mentioned. If you see an image of a book throughout, there's going to be a link to that book on my page as well. And on the resource sheet that you get through the summit. So this first idea is math class is too narrow. What do we mean by that? Well, at the center of the way we normally plan math class, the way math class was designed in my day when I was in school in the 80s, math class was really privileged those who were fast. This is kid language. That's why it's in quotes in the research that I've done. The kids who are good at math are those that are fast, the ones that know it already. It also often privileges those who can sit still, who can remember well, who can replicate procedures like after being shown them only once or twice, who are really organized. So who's outside? If this is sort of math class is too narrow and only sort of a narrow set of student skills are like really prized, who's outside it? Well, it could be kids who have just trouble learning from a lecture. It could be kids who have a lot of trouble memorizing facts or procedures when they're disconnected. It could be kids who have never really been given a chance to do problem solving on their own. It could be kids who were labeled slow or a low kid, which is a really unfortunate and problematic naming we have of kids in schools across the US. And kids often know that that's how they've been named. And when I interview them, they tell me. It could be a kid who needs extra time and support with concepts, a kid who's disorganized, a kid who can't sit still, for someone for whom math class is emotionally overwhelming, someone who doesn't feel a relationship with the teacher, someone who's learning 2 languages at once, which is a wonderful benefit, but can be challenging, and maybe a kid who doesn't see themselves in the curriculum. All of these ways puts some kids on the margins of our math class, and some kids are at the center. And this is the first thing we want to do, which is recognize that math class is too narrow. It doesn't, not all of our kids and their many gifts are being included in it. Not all of their skill sets are part of what makes our mathematics classrooms great. So we're going to turn to universal design. Universal design is where UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, comes from. And I begin there because I think it's really important to understand sort of where this idea came from. Universal design, it was a movement in architecture and product design that was started by Ronald Mace, a disabled architect, who you can see his image here. And he was a wheelchair user. And his idea or innovation was that products, buildings, and spaces should work for all people. We shouldn't design buildings so that they have stairs, and then afterwards we put some ugly ramp that we sort of add onto it. He believed that if we design buildings so that they work for a wider range of users, the design will become better. Not more complicated, but often simpler. Simpler because it meets a variety of needs. And the really important aspect of universal design is that we begin by understanding that from a disabled user perspective. So empathy interviews are a tool in design that we're going to talk about, where you interview the user, the person who's going to use your product. In our case, that's design. I mean, that's the design of curriculum or spaces or anything like that. I just want to make a note that I'm using here both identity first and person first language based on preferences as I can determine, or mixing it up because many activists prefer identity first language, not person first language. So I use both. So an example of universal design is this vegetable peeler. This peeler, I've used it. I think my mother still has one of those. But it was redesigned by a team that was a product designer and his wife who had, I believe, arthritis. And she was having trouble using this vegetable peeler. And together, they collectively redesigned the tool so that it worked for her. But in working for her, it works for a wider range of people. Like, it works for kids. My kids use this tool. It works on Thanksgiving when you're doing many, 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 many potatoes with it, right? So the tool is redesigned so that it works for a wider range of people, and it's a better design. So UDL is for everybody. I hear people emphasizing this all the time, but I also want to just let you know, because some people are curious about this. For me, I'm centering disability, and that's because Universal Design for Learning came from a disabled perspective, and Universal Design did as well. And disability is a really important kind of learner variability that helps us design the best classrooms we can. And disability is really personally important to me. And I take a perspective on it that is focused on how people with disabilities experience classrooms and learning. So one thing to keep in mind is that there's connections being made between anti-racism and universal design for learning. So Tisha Fitzgerald has a book here, which is about how to make on-ramps for learning for all kids, particularly students of color and or students of color with disabilities. Neurodiversity is the framework that I'm going to draw on today. It's not mine. I didn't make it up. I'm just using it. It was actually created by disabled people, by autistic self-advocates. And the basic ideas are that each person comes with strengths and challenges, and that insiders are the experts, and that you design through strengths, but also consider challenges. So you can learn more about neurodiversity from this amazing yet very thick book called Neurotribes, about the history of autism. You can learn about the perspective of people with autism who are non-white through this book, All Narratives, All the Weight of Our Dreams. And a book that I'm going to talk about today is called Dyslexia is My Superpower. And these are narratives of young people with dyslexia in England, which is a fascinating read to learn about dyslexia from an insider perspective. So we're going to think briefly about design. So ramps are kind of an important thing in universal design. Ramps are important in how we think about universal design for learning. So I want to give you a chance to do some kind of creative design thinking. What do you notice and wonder about these ramps? And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to look and think and maybe jot down some notes. All right, so I'm going to share. I unfortunately can't ask you what you noticed because it's pre-recorded, but I'm going to share what I've heard from educators in the past when I've shown these. So if you look at A, I mean, people are shocked. This is an amazing image I found somewhere on the web where somebody thinks they've created an accessible ramp, but clearly it's the most dangerous ramp that has ever been created. This gives us a sense that sometimes we can create designs that are completely inaccessible and just put a sticker on them and assume that they are accessible to all because we put a sticker on it, right? It's not accessible if we think about it from the perspective of a wheelchair user. Well, here's another design. What about this is the perspective of the wheelchair user here. Here we can see an image of some stairs, and on top of them are some aluminum like ramps, one for each wheel of the wheelchair. And when I look at this picture, I'm thinking about that person who's about to go down them, and I'm wondering, are they going to move? Are they the right distance apart? It feels like, yes, there's some access here, but it's kind of tenuous, and it's clearly just for this person. When this person's gone, it feels like these ramps are going to be taken away. It is only there for this one person to pass this one time. It's not a permanent solution. What about this image? People have different reactions to this image. Some educators look at it and they say, oh, that's so beautiful. That really reminds me of universal design for learning, because you could be a wheelchair user and go up and down the ramps. At the same time, people can be walking up and down the ramps. And other people might say, yes, I hear you. It's very beautiful. But at the same time, it looks like if I put myself in the perspective of a wheelchair user, that is going to be some rough turns. Like if you think about going down that ramp, you got to turn, turn. This actually could be kind of a stressful way to get down a slope. And it turns out that these stairs were designed for accessibility, but from what I read online, the architect didn't really consider the perspectives of those with wheelchairs, just designed from what this person thought those people would want. So it's a design that's from this other perspective and doesn't take into account the actual users. So it turns out people with wheelchairs don't really use these stairs very much, but they're used a lot by skateboarders, which is kind of cool because I can really imagine skateboarding on those. And here's the last image I want to analyze. Things people have noticed about this is that the ramp is permanent. The ramp is central. The ramp is in the middle of the building. There's a lot of empty space in this area. And the ramp is really wide and the slope is very gradual. This ramp is part of the Ed Roberts Independent Living Center in Berkeley, which is independent living is a movement created by Ed Roberts, who was a person with polio who integrated Berkeley, UC Berkeley, for people with disabilities back in the, oh no, I think the late 60s, but I'm not sure. So he created the independent living movement, which was basically a way for disabled people to help other disabled people, not non-disabled people helping disabled people, but a community that was really all about disability. And this is their new building they built in 2009. And in it, a couple of things to notice: the wideness of the ramp is so that two people with wheelchairs can push themselves up or come down and still talk and still be together and still be in community. It's wide enough and also gradual enough that two deaf users of ASL can talk to each other while being safe enough to come down. So if you make it too narrow, people can't talk to each other using ASL, right? So this is an example of something called deaf space, which is how space can be organized around the actual needs of deaf users. So this, to me, is a design that centers the people who are actually going to use the space. And this is an inspiration for us to create curriculum and space, math classrooms that really are designed so that they can work for the widest range of people. These other are basically examples of design fails. And I would say that access without empathy is a design fail. Like if you can use it, but we haven't actually thought about your perspective deeply enough to design it so it really does work for you, that's a design fail. So Universal Design for Learning took these ideas and took them into the realm of learning. This is a much older picture than Universal Design for Learning, which started in the 80s, but it gives me an image of one size fits all classroom. So all the kids are sitting, they're all supposed to sit the same way. This is one size fits all. This is the opposite of Universal Design for Learning. In Universal Design for Learning, we don't look for the problem in any of these individual kids. we look at the entire setup and the design of the learning experience. That can be the space, the curriculum, rules, norms. Those are the things that we change and transform so that kids can succeed, and that classrooms become better if we include all kids. The one term that we use a lot in UDL is design from the margins, meaning that if we think about the experiences of those that the classroom is really not working for, we can make it better for everybody. Our goal is expert learners. It's not just like stuffing content into kids' heads. It's purposeful, resourceful, strategic learners. And a core way of understanding those learners is not as any kind of labels. Instead, it's about learner variability, which highlights how different kids are. So one important idea from UDL is these three areas: engagement, why we learn; representation, what we learn; and action and expression, which is how we learn. The importance of these three areas to me is that UDL stresses that it's not just content we learn. Learning is effective, learning is strategic. We learn how to be learners, not just some math content. Learner variability is about how there's a variability in how we see, think, pay attention, walk, remember, handle stress. We're all unique, and then we have unique experiences layered on top of that. And so that we are the kids who come into our classroom are very different. Each learner is complex, and across contexts, they're complex. But at the same time, there are patterns in that variability that can help us design and plan across variability. So UDL Math, which is what I've been working on for several years, adds a specific focus on teaching and learning math to UDL in general. It also integrates design thinking. One of the problems with UDL, in my opinion, can be that the way teachers are exposed to it is someone just hands you a set of guidelines and you're supposed to sort of use it like a checklist and see if it matches, but that's not what design is. Design is about thinking and planning, and it's about a process of making something better, not about planning it after the fact. It's actually the opposite of UDL. So the other important thing for you about UDL Math is that disability is at the center of it, because I think that disability is a really important way to push our classrooms to be more inclusive of everybody. So I want to think about what an expert learner is in mathematics. So what do we really want our kids in mathematics? These I've gathered from educators that I've done workshops with. These are the things that teachers want for their kids. They want kids to ask questions when they need help, jump into problems and solve them, persists when stuck, knows when they don't know, so a sense maker. So I sum this all up in my design of UDL Math as strategic sense makers. So I want to make sure that kids are both strategic and they understand how to be strategic in mathematics, but they're also sense makers. They understand when they understand it, and they understand when they don't understand it, right? And they keep working until they do. So we're going to use all these different tools now to design for a particular set of learners. So we're going to do this thing called designing from the margins. So if you think of learners with a learning disability in reading and or dyslexia, we've used different terms at different times historically, currently. They mean basically the same thing: a student who has a learning disability. So that could be processing issues, that could be language issues, it could be working memory issues, and need some extra help in school, particularly in the area of reading. And dyslexia, which is more about a specific phonological processing deficit, but really isn't about that. It's also about a particular way of seeing the world. Well, we'll get to that. So how do these differences matter in learning mathematics? So we're going to jump into this book where Margaret Roque collected narratives from kids with dyslexia. And I looked through the entire book. I actually paid my son $20 to read the whole book and to type out everything that mentioned math. So I'm going to present those to you because they're a really cool tool for analysis. So Elliot, 17, said, "Other kids had known I was struggling in primary school. It was quite obvious when it came to doing maths. We would stand in a line with the teacher facing the front of the queue. The teacher would ask, 'What's 9 times 12?' If you got it wrong, you would go to the back of the queue, and I was always there. I still can't remember my times tables. I can't quite place the information together." Charlie, 17, said, "I was always labeled not good at maths when this shouldn't have been the case. Schools put you in boxes and leave you there." That is a deep comment by Charlie. Freddie, 10, said, "In maths, I didn't know my times tables. I couldn't take them in. I only know my 2s, 3s, and 10s. Fiona, 15, says, "I actually like maths. I like getting through it slowly and problem solving. What I like is that there is more than one way to answer a question. If I can't do something, I can get there another way." Max, 17, says, "I'm very good at 3D, the hands-on stuff, and I'm quite good at science and the geometry side of maths." Elijah 12 says, in maths, they, the other kids, were really quick at sums that took me ages. And Molly 13 says, I solve math problems in a different way. I visualize them. So I want you to think about these quotes, and I'm going to give you about a few seconds to think about what barriers exist for these learners in classrooms, not what deficits they have. I don't want to hear what they're not good at. I want to hear what barriers, what makes it hard for them to learn, and what supports learning. So let's talk a little bit more about dyslexia. Challenges that people with dyslexia or learning disability in the area of reading may have challenges in phonological processing, language processing, memory, particularly disconnected memory for facts and procedures. So that's a particular difficulty for people with dyslexia. Working memory in LD in general is an issue, and so is executive functioning, so planning and organization. But what about strengths? This book, which I give you the link to, is of clinicians who've worked with adults with dyslexia for many years and talking about the research on strengths. Now, we know a lot more from research about what challenges people have versus their strengths. For some reason, we invest a lot more money in challenges versus strengths, but we do know something about strengths. People with dyslexia have strengths in visual spatial processing, often three-dimensional visual spatial processing, creativity, pattern finding, seeing connections, seeing the big picture, and narrative thinking. So I want you to think about this set of challenges and strengths based on what you know about dyslexia, what you know about math, and what you just learned from those kids with dyslexia. What challenges are emerging and what strengths? So here we see Edmund, who I just described, and in our research we found that we interviewed 5 dyslexic mathematicians, and we found that visual spatial processing, three-dimensional mathematical thinking was something that they shared in common. 4 out of 5 were topologists, actually, which is the study of mathematics in 3 dimensions that moves. People with the dyslexic mathematicians identified creativity as a strength. Being able to see the big picture, the forest rather than the trees, was a strength. And they also said that they had difficulty with their math facts. They're dyslexic mathematicians who didn't necessarily know their multiplication facts. And so it hasn't really hampered their success. They're amazingly successful mathematicians. So another window on that comes from a blog post of a dyslexic mathematician who wrote, as a dyslexic, I've never been good at calculations or recalling rote facts like times tables. Here's the thing, beyond a certain point in mathematics, it's not really about calculations. Geometry class was when math became interesting and easier for me. Suddenly I was in a world not of strands of symbols to be processed, but of shape, space, lines, angles, concepts, and narrative-like proofs. Suddenly everything made sense. This actually inspired this project for Edmund and I to sort of go deeper into dyslexia and mathematics at the highest level, because it seemed so amazing that we could think of the mathematics that people with dyslexia might be really strong at instead of focusing on that is really hard for them. And the part that's really hard, that memorization, is their disability. It's what makes memorization hard for them. And could we design around strengths? So in the last part of the presentation, we're going to take this exact situation, these kids and their narratives, and think about how would we design around knowing this. So design thinking in general, and this is design thinking as used in architecture, as used in product design, it always begins in empathy. It always begins from the perspective of the user. So in this case, you want to know your students. You can do empathy interviews with your students. You can sit down and talk to them and ask them questions about math class and try to develop understanding of their point of view of what the experience is like. And you can do it across multiple students and thus design across variability. So here we're pretending these are what we maybe gathered from those interviews, right? These little tidbits from these students. That we take knowing our students and we put it into conversation with knowing our goals. So what's our goals as a math teacher? Well, we talked before, expert learners, strategic sense makers. So how do we take what we're learning about kids at the margins, here, kids with dyslexia, and how do we make environments will help them develop as strategic sense makers. So this is where another tool I've created for UDL Math, the design elements, comes into play. And the design elements take the UDL guidelines and I sort of translate them into math, taking what we know about math learning into account. So this is too much. Don't look at it. We're going to, at the center of all of it is strategic sense makers, but I'm going to look at each one at a time. So engagement. The question, the first idea of engagement is, does the classroom feel safe for students? Is it safe enough that they can take mathematical risks? Are they building relationships in and through mathematics? Students report that they need the classroom to feel safe. They need a relationship with this teacher where they feel respected, and it needs to be a place where if you make a mistake, you don't feel shamed. So I was thinking about this whole situation where you go to the back if you get it wrong. This doesn't feel like a safe situation for this student, for Elliot. A second aspect of engagement is meaningful mathematics. Is the math meaningful and relevant to students? Students ask for this to be true. They want it to make sense. They want it to be culturally authentic to them. They want to engage in sense making and have opportunities to solve challenging problems, not baby problems. They want to do real mathematics. So I'm thinking here about Fiona, who's 15, who says that she loves getting through math slowly and problem solving. I love that. So she identifies with this kind of, maybe it takes her longer, but she loves to solve a problem. Representation is the area of content. So there's the first area I want to focus our attention on is investing time in core ideas. In mathematics, first of all, we've got a lot of content to cover. We have pacing guides, but there are many students who just will not learn at that pace. And I know that this is kind of a troubling thing to say because I was a teacher for a long time, but it's the reality that some kids will need more time. So how do we design classrooms so we can give extra time and not rush kids through? One way we can do that is to make sure that we are spending more time on the more important topics, and that the time we're spending, the design is systematic so that we really make sure that kids understand core mathematical ideas, mathematical representations, and develop strategies. So here I'm thinking about this child who says, in math, they were really quick at sums that took me ages. For this kid, he needed more time, and this class didn't seem to give it to him. The second aspect of representation is that mathematical content is inherently multimodal. Math is not just algebra. Math is not just geometry. Math is the intersection between algebra and geometry, which means math is it the most multimodal topic, content area? I don't know. But it's inherently multimodal. You can't just teach math through one modality. So we want to make sure that it's accessible to all, including students who are blind or who are deaf. The multimodality needs to work for access. And can students choose how they solve problems? We also want to make sure that we design so that mathematical representations are connected to each other, because that's critical in mathematics. So I'm thinking about Fiona again, where she says, what I like is there's more than one way to answer a question. If I can't do something, I can get there another way. That often for kids means that they draw a picture, that they use manipulatives, they use different tools, mathematical visual tools to get to their answer. And another, Molly also says that she visualizes math problems. So this could be a way to design instruction that's more accessible, right? Strategic action, the first area to think about is equitable feedback. That idea is that we want to feedback, homework, tests, assessment. Those can be barriers for kids, lots of kids, in the way we currently teach mathematics. So we need to redesign assessment. We need to redesign feedback so that assessment isn't just assessment, the stressful thing, but it's feedback that helps the student grow. So it's formative assessment. But we could call it a lot of different terms, but does the feedback help students grow? And is it equitable, or have we designed assessment that is not fair for all kids? So I was thinking about this line where the kid goes in the back, they haven't memorized it. That's not fair if memorization is a problem, is part of his disability. Elliot, with dyslexia, he has trouble memorizing things like that. Does he really need to be put in the back of the queue? And the last one is understanding self as a math learner. So it's really important that we design classrooms that help kids understand not just the math, but themselves. They need to develop this understanding so they can become like lifelong learners, that they can develop the habits of mind so they can succeed in their next math class, so they can self-advocate and ask for what they want, what they need. So Max is a great example of this. I love how he can list everything about math and science that he's really good at. So we have empathy, we know our students, we have purpose, we know our goals. How is math class too narrow? If we look at these particular students, I saw a stressful focus on memorization, and I think we could expand opportunities for visual problem solving, right? Those are two ways we could really design to help these students. So we then design a how might we question. So here's some that I made up if I was thinking about those kids all being in the same class. How might we expand opportunities for visual problem solving? How might we provide more time for students to solve problems? How might we design opportunities for students to increase their fluency without stress? How might we design a geometry unit to start the year that provides opportunities for all students to engage in accessible math? So putting together empathy, knowing our students and our purpose, we can try to figure out how math class is too narrow and how we can open it up and provide strategic supports. This is a way that we can design tier 1 instruction that's flexible and engaging, and where our focus is on an expert learner, where students develop as strategic sense makers. And the last slide just reminds us that when kids are in tier 2 and tier 3, they're still getting tier 1. It's added on, but it does not replace it. They get both things. And I see tier 2 and tier 3 also as flexible, engaging instruction that we design so that students continue to develop as strategic sense makers. So this reminds us of where we began. And here are the resources. You're going to have access to this through this site, and they're also available on my website. And now I will be available for questions. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your voices. So as I'm waiting for some other questions, one thing I would talk about is some of the ideas that already got put into the chat is the idea from Ian that is wondering about teachers and curriculum writers designing what we think students need, or are we actually talking with them? This has been one of the big transformations for me as a teacher, is that I love designing things. I love designing things as a teacher, and as a teacher educator now, I like making my syllabus. I like making activities. And I found that a lot of times I'm just designing for me. I'm designing for what I want. And I have been working really hard to try to design for the user, whether it's a special educator learning about mathematics in my methods classes, or whether it's a kid learning math at school. But it's not easy, and it takes time to shift from designing for me to designing for other kids. All right, here's a question. How do we suggest that we advocate for these kinds of designs with policymakers and school leaders? That's a great question. And that's one of the reasons that I've been trying to work on this work and share it as much as possible, because UDL is actually in policy documents here in California. It's cited in the framework as the way that we should approach disability and lots of different things. I mean, UDL is for everybody, right? Even though I center disability because I'm not interested in ignoring it, it's for everybody. So it's included in a lot of policy. It's included in the Common Core. It's included in a lot of places, but people just don't know how to do it. They know that UDL, we should use UDL, but how to do UDL? That's, I think, what we need to work on and expand. And that's why I started working on it specifically in math, because I think it's a little different in math. So we can share all these things. I have an article on UDL that I did for teaching for the NCTM Journal for Teachers. And that's a good one to share with policymakers. That's, I guess, the beginning of my question. With school leaders, I think that UDL is kind of intuitive, actually. So once we make it seem a little less complicated and a little more like, hey, is math class too narrow? What are the barriers? How can we open it up? I feel people kind of lose that stress that they had, where there was just too much going on, too much checking of the guidelines. Kind of the process is really what we need to fix to get UDL in the hands of teachers. Right, so UDL wouldn't mean any specific change, and UDL doesn't mean that we necessarily have to de-emphasize knowing math facts. What UDL is about for me is that we have to figure out from kids what they need and want. So I have heard from a lot of kids and not just these kids in this book, but kids in other books, that memorization is like certain ways of memorizing math facts is really stressful for them. Like timed tests it's stressful for kids. Adults share that all the time. I think that's they report that it's stressful. Yes, that's definitely true. So, but there are a lot of ways to do like memorization of math facts that are actually really fun. So I am in a research project right now where we're using math games. There is Jennifer Bay Williams is a scholar who has written a great book called Math Fact Fluency, and it's all about games, and it's all about like ways to assess math facts without making kids feel nervous. Kids need to be fluent with their math facts, or we should work towards that. For some kids, that's going to be really hard. There's going to be a subset of kids that they won't be able to memorize it like these research mathematicians, but they can find it other ways because they're mathematically strong. They have reasoning strategies. That's the most important thing. But working towards memorization for most kids is not that bad. It's not a bad practice if we do it in a way that's not stressful to them, and we can. How do we beef up tier one? Tier one is like, right, you've got to invest in tier one. We got to, and that's exactly what we do need to do. That's what UDL is all about. It's like, instead of just figuring out who it's not working for and taking them out, we have to figure out how to make tier one more intensive. So there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And you can really, I think, would be the way your districts, or already the strengths that you have in your district, include them, intensify them. Are you doing number strings or number talks? Can you intensify those in the classroom? Do you think about engagement? Because sometimes it's not just what the teacher is doing. It's like, are the kids engaged? And can we make plans to make them more engaged? How can we, I've done research projects where I go in and I look at the engagement of kids, and then I present it to the teacher and say, okay, you know, your kids are really engaged by this metric, but then there's a couple kids who are like not talking in small groups, for example. What can we do about that? So to increase engagement is a way to increase tier one achievement without necessarily going for achievement, right? So sometimes going for engagement is really the way to go. But there's so many different ways to improve tier one. I would suggest figuring out what you're really good at and intensifying the curriculum that you already have. Is there a book? I'm actually going to meet with my editor when I'm done with this, because I'm publishing a book on UDL Math in Math Classroom K-8. Hopefully that will be helpful. For the Reporter with Education Week, feel free to email me and I'll send you that the research I'm talking about, and that scholar, Jennifer Bay Williams, who's doing such great work on math facts and fluency. You're welcome, Kimberly. Thank you for my new favorite thing. What is my legitimize all forms of mathematical thinking? I love that. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everybody, for coming and making me feel not so awkward. I really appreciate it. I'm going to do sessions at NCTM and NCSM and NCTM Research Projects in Washington, D.C., if anybody's around. And I think I have links to some of the resources I talked about. Hopefully they should, or I sent them like a month ago, so they should be there already, where you can look and explore and learn more about this area. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Ian.